morning, everyone. Welcome to day two of the International Symposium. We are so glad to have you all with us today. We will be joined this morning by Leslie Robinson, Associate Director of the Institute for Entrepreneurship at Colorado State University and co-founder of the Ionic Foundation. Leslie will be giving a session today titled Coaching Changemakers, where entrepreneurial leadership meets global impact. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. If anybody would like to use CC, it is enabled down at the bottom of your screen, so please just make that selection on your own. There is also a way for you to submit questions throughout the session using the Q&A button. We would love to hear from you all throughout, and when the time comes, we will be reading those questions to Leslie. You will also receive a feedback questionnaire at the end of the session. We really encourage you to fill that survey out, as we definitely use that feedback in planning for next year's symposium. And we will also be recording these sessions, and we will be making them available on our website in the next week or two. So if there's something that you miss and you want to see it again, please visit us there. With that, I will turn it over to Leslie. Thank you all again so much for coming. Leslie, thank you for doing this. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Great. Thank you so much, Mason. Thank you so much to the International Programs Office, CSU. This is a topic that I absolutely love, so appreciate the opportunity to share it. If Mason, you'll just let me know that my slides are up and ready to go, we can get started.
Yep, it looks great.
Awesome. So excited to speak with you all today about coaching change makers. I've got a couple of prompt questions for you to engage in the chat with, and Mason will integrate it within the presentation, so as engaging as possible. But, to start the conversation, really, where have you seen development succeed because local leaders were empowered? And so that's really what we're going to dive into today is that entrepreneurial leadership piece of development and how then you can become a more entrepreneurial leader and really start to define yourself and see yourself that way. But before we get started, I'm going to introduce myself. So I'm a howdy girl. So I'm Leslie Robinson, Associate Director for the Institute for Entrepreneurship. We call it I4E here at CSU. Proud CSU alum, so graduated with my PhD in higher education leadership recently in 2024, where my research was focused on entrepreneurial leadership. So no joke, I really do love this topic. It is my passion area, but also have history in international education. So specifically with the U.S. State Department and study abroad international services, and love that I can infuse both the entrepreneurship piece of my career with the international global piece of my career too. And so have been fortunate enough to work with a few professional fellow programs, specifically the YSEALI, which is the Young Southeast Asian Leadership Initiative, where we were able to host at I4E two fellows last semester from Malaysia and also the Philippines. And so love to also be able to infuse that global perspective in the work that we do at I4E. So just a little bit about me to give some context, but like I said, that intersection of entrepreneurship and global mindset is where I really love to spend a lot of my time. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today. So quickly, just a little bit about the Institute for Entrepreneurship. If you haven't visited us, we're in the College of Business. We are in Rockwell North. Please come over, say hi, say howdy. But we really believe in a zero barrier approach to entrepreneurship. And so our vision is a values to venture model. And so I also want to infuse that into this presentation too, really that founder focus piece before even thinking about starting a business. So that mindset piece is really critical here. We believe that innovation begins with people, so not just ideas. So really, again, back to that founder central focus. Who are you as a founder? What is your why? What is your purpose? And so I've got some resources and tools to help you understand how to really take that values first initiative and approach to then the venture business side. So as we said at I4E, we're beyond ideas. And so that really looks like belonging and infusing that global mindset however we can. So taking the local to the global, and then really always investing in a culture of flourishing. So I really believe that flourishing is giving back at the same rate that you grow. So as you learn and grow, you give back to the communities, to the founders that helped you along. And where this all leads us to is really kind of, in my opinion, a differentiator for the work that we do, the work that I do, which is that we don't just produce entrepreneurs, we don't just, start new businesses, but really we think about it in terms of producing, cultivating global entrepreneurial leaders. And so that's where I want to go is how do we define that? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How can you begin to maybe define yourself as a global entrepreneurial leader? So the title of the session was changing or coaching change makers, but really I think that a change maker in this sense is a global entrepreneurial leader. And so really then looking at entrepreneurial leadership and global impact. And so again, that intersection of the two. So I believe that there's this global development shift between an old model and a new model. And I see this really infused with an entrepreneurial mindset. So going from aid to agency, going from expert-led to community-led, going from solutions delivered to solutions co-created, and then projects to ecosystems. And so as I think about this framework and I think about what it's leading up to, I really envision it more in terms of like intervention to collaboration. And I'm someone who strongly believes in the power of collaboration for good and collaboration over competition. And so I think that that's where we lead change from inside systems, but especially the empowerment piece. So, how do we empower others to lead change? And all of that really comes from that entrepreneurial mindset, entrepreneurial leadership piece, and how you see yourself as a leader, how you begin to describe yourself in that way too. So I want to ask, and this was the question for the session, and I'd love your thoughts in the chat and in the comments. But as global development moves beyond borders, ask yourself, or where have you seen, how do we empower individuals to drive change from within? And Mason, I'll pause here for a second if you've got any feedback or even from the prompt question at the introduction. But how do we empower individuals to drive change from within?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leslie. I think I'll give it just a couple minutes to see what folks submit. But I love that infograph that you just displayed as far as changing from aid to agency and expert led to community led. I think we're really seeing that across across global development initiatives, and I love that that's a focus for your topic so far.
Thanks. Yeah,
Um,
it's a shift, right? It doesn't have to be
mhm.
aggressive and it doesn't have to be disruptive. It can be a shift.
Yeah, and I think there's a much better chance of lasting, lasting impactful change when it is community led. Um, all right, we've got some feedback coming in. So from Greg Weimer, we have a comment today. Greg thinks that it starts with instilling a global mindset within our community.
Yes, absolutely. We are going there next. That's awesome. I I agree.
I think it's a fitting question too, especially considering we have our Peace Corps anniversary dinner or reception this week. It is Peace Corps week too, and so that has been a topic of theirs as well, as far as how do we really shift this idea of development to empower individuals.
Great. And I should mention on the Peace Corps front, I mean, I feel like all of my lessons learned in leadership, especially, but especially entrepreneurial leadership, have been moments where I have been abroad in global contexts where, and I say it all the time, where you get comfortable being uncomfortable. Those are the moments of growth, right? It's the hard moments that lead to, I always say, the heart moments. And so I love then that a global mindset is the vehicle to make those shifts. And if we don't have any more comments, Mason, that's fine. I'm happy to continue on, but didn't know if you wanted to give one more.
Yeah, we have a couple more that came in. So some folks are saying connect them with others who have done the same or who want
Yes.
to do the same in other places. So we don't always have to recreate the wheel. I think sometimes we can build off other great work that's being done. Listening to ideas about what is important and the knowledge of the local ways of being and the challenges that the people experience. Um, and we have another comment that says establishing a compelling shared purpose and necessary resources for individuals and groups to carry out.
I love that shared purpose, right? And purpose is critical because you have to also understand your purpose, right? Do the introspective work to then understand how to get to shared alignment with others and the purposes that they have. Well, that's
Mhm.
great. Thank you all. I hope that we can infuse those comments throughout the presentation because that's exactly where I want to go, and I agree completely. So. My answer to this question is global entrepreneurial leadership. So, really, then thinking through a leadership framework or a leadership philosophy. And so, when we think about entrepreneur leaders, I always would love for people to like envision someone in their life that encompasses what they would maybe define as an entrepreneur leader. And we'll really get more clear on that definition as we go. But think about someone who created meaningful change in your community. And what made them effective? So what were the skills? What were the competencies that they had? What were the strengths that they brought? And so as we move forward, think about that person in the context of a global entrepreneurial leader. For me, I think about my professional fellow, Dharma, who I met in Indonesia with the Waisili program, who really came to the university that I was working at and was so hungry to learn and took notes and just absorbed everything. And so, absolutely had a strength of learning and connectedness to then bring back to Indonesia. And then I was lucky enough to go on a reciprocal exchange and visit her and see how she was also able to take the lessons learned from her time in the US, apply them with that cultural context in Indonesia and specifically in Makassar and Toraja, where she lived, and really find that balance between that shared purpose, right? That alignment, and how can we teach entrepreneurial leadership? So I'm going to keep Dharma close to my heart as we go through this presentation. So, in terms of a model or framework and just visualizations help too, when I think about global entrepreneurial leadership, it's really someone who is on a journey, right? It should be evergreen and it should be ongoing. And so, what that means is really someone who has spent a lot of time on their identity and their mindset, and also have taken more of a coaching approach in terms of the give back, that flourishing piece, but also, the importance of soft diplomacy and impact. And so, if we can think through this global entrepreneurial leadership as a model and as a journey, we're going to make stops along the way in all of these different areas so that you can begin to hopefully incorporate, infuse, put this into practice for yourself. But someone said global mindset, and we're going to first talk about entrepreneurial mindset because I think we need that foundation, that basic understanding of what is an entrepreneurial mindset. So really at its root, at its core, it's turning problems into opportunities. So it's being focused. But also the piece that I love about an entrepreneurial mindset is that it has both not only an economic impact, but also a social impact too, right? So understanding where impact can be in communities. Oftentimes I think about that in terms of legacy building as well. And I do want to just pause and share here that absolutely we'll be sharing the link to this presentation. So if you want to go back to these slides, you'll absolutely have the opportunity to do that too. So that's our basis for an entrepreneurial mindset. And then when we think about a global mindset, it's going to be someone who is going to be rooted in more openness and cultural curiosity, right? So I think always of the perspective. For me, perspective is a giant value. I love new sights, new sounds, new smells, new taste. And so I always practice my global mindset in terms of trying new things. So that is absolutely something that just brings me joy and alignment. And I think about that in a global mindset because it's going to be curiosity for things that are not normal or common for you. It's going to be able to be flexible in your thinking, and that adaptability piece is critical. Empathetic, so really putting yourself in the place of others, so that deep listening for understanding, for shared purpose, as was mentioned in the comments. Systems thinking approach, so understanding how we're all connected, and especially from local lived experiences. And then inclusive leadership, so really understanding the value of diversity, and especially using diversity as a superpower in whatever way that you want to define diversity, for problem solving. And if we think back to that entrepreneurial mindset and it being opportunity seeking, that's really the thing that we want to hone in on is how do we, be opportunity seeking, take it from the local to the global, and that's how you've kind of beautifully infused the two. And so that intersection piece, right, is going to be the creative resiliency, resourcefulness of the entrepreneurial mindset with the curious, empathetic, and systems aware viewpoints of the global mindset. And so when I think about someone who has, encompasses, cultivates, has invested in a global entrepreneurial mindset, it's absolutely someone who sees opportunities across borders, leads with empathy across cultures, and builds solutions across differences. And so I always strive for that. I always really try to understand cultural context, and context is actually a blind spot for me. And so for me, I've been able to do it in a better way in a more diverse setting. So it's an empowerment mindset, right? It's someone who really empowers themselves, but then that flourishing piece gives back to other the need to be able to be comfortable launching ideas and creating across borders and thinking like founders, but also more importantly, thinking like humans, right? We're all in this together. We have this shared world, this shared purpose. So one more thing I want to add here is just also the soft diplomacy piece, and how that can really complement then this entrepreneurial leadership conversation that we're having. So we think about soft diplomacy, it's really the relationships and the cultural understanding that we're building along the way in our journey, of finding ourselves and living in our why, but also that comes with like strong influencing strengths too. So it's more influential than it is authoritative. And where I think about soft diplomacy, I think about all of the global experiences that I've had, but also you don't need a passport to have those experiences. You just really need to get somewhere where it's different, right? Where it's a different neighborhood or a different part of town or a different state, right? It doesn't have to actually equal leaving your home country, or going to a host country. It really can just be going somewhere that isn't in your normal pathway and routine to practice the soft diplomacy piece. And so I think that it's actually one of the most powerful tools that we have, is to be able to have shared purpose amongst each others. So we have a little bit of framework, a little bit of definition and foundation around the mindset pieces and the intersection of the two. And so what I really want to do now is for you to imagine yourself as an entrepreneurial leader. So what does that mean? What does that look like? How would you start to describe yourself? How would you start to describe the person that you have in your mind as one? And so as I mentioned, this is my research area topic. And so through a lot of study and definition, there wasn't really a lot of concrete definitions. And so the one that I came up with, the one that I really hold true for who is an entrepreneur leader, is someone who empowers others to act, right? So we're back to that empowerment piece of it, who solves problems and navigates in uncertainty and ambiguity. They take risk, right? So they have a appetite for risk, which is needed in terms of being able to have the grit and the tenacity to think about starting a business, right? But the piece that I love the most in terms of as a leadership framework with entrepreneurial leadership is that they're understanding themselves through their motivations, their identities, their strengths, and their values. So it's a journey, and it's an introspective journey. It's really where you have to go deep to understand who you are first and foremost as a founder, as a person, before you actually go and like find the thing, right? And so that's where I always encourage our students and others that I work with to go from, is that introspective piece. But if we think about it in terms of a formal definition, it's going to be someone who has strong achievement, really high enthusiasm and creativity. They act quickly, right? So they're very decisive. They're visionary. They're in a constant hurry. So always wanting to go, 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 which can lead to you know, that fail fast, or I prefer fail forward approach that sometimes we hear associated with entrepreneurship. They have a dislike of hierarchy, which makes sense, right? Oftentimes, right? We see entrepreneurs want to be their own boss, which is why they start their own business because they don't want to work for anyone else. They love the external customer, so they're obsessed with the customer, and they have their eye on the future. So back to that visionary perspective. So we think about entrepreneurial leaders with this definition. We would oftentimes describe them as very charismatic and very innovative, right? And being a risk taker. And I think risk taking absolutely shows itself in those who go and get comfortable being uncomfortable, whether that is, like I said, in your hometown in a different neighborhood, or um, traveling nationally or internationally. And so I think anyone who has that global mindset and that desire to travel actually has pretty strong appetite for risk. So now, like take inventory. Are you an entrepreneurial leader? I'd love for you to put in the chat whether or not you're starting to see and define yourself as one. So entrepreneurial leaders are also people that know themselves. They are continuously seeking input from others, right? So that desire to always have improvement, to continuously grow. They let out others shine. Excuse me. They allow others to shine. They invest in the team and especially like take the pause to celebrate wins. They set the vision. They solve problems collaboratively. They're very value oriented. So as I started, it's kind of that values before ventures, and so values as the foundation piece. And they want to make an impact, right? They really want to leave their mark on the world. They want to understand what it is that they can contribute. And I think contribution is such a powerful piece of finding your purpose is where can you contribute? So Mason's short pause here. If anyone has added anything in the chat, I'd love to reference it.
Definitely. We have some ideas coming in for sure. We have some folks who have identified themselves
Oh,
as an
good.
entrepreneurial and social leader. Um, yeah, we have some other folks who've done some great stuff in the past. I myself, looking through that list, um, I don't necessarily identify as an entrepreneurial leader, and I am so curious to know kind of how, and maybe this is a better question to reserve for the end, but if you don't identify yourself as a risk taker, but you're curious to
Yeah.
learn more and to put yourself out there, it's like, what are the small steps that people can take to go outside their comfort zone and really push forward when it feels maybe so uncomfortable and dangerous isn't the right word, but maybe risk averse.
Yeah, I think risk
Um,
averse is great. And actually, everyone's appetite for risk is going to be different because people have more to lose than others, right? Especially if you have dependents. And so it's really interesting to think about the psychology of risk taking and how some are more comfortable with risk. And so for me, I think that like how you become more comfortable being uncomfortable, that risk factor, is you start to know yourself so well that you can put in place a decision-making process that then helps you get to a decision. You're mitigating risk. You're not eliminating it. It's impossible to eliminate, but at least you've built either, a board of directors personally that you can go to for advice,
hmm,
or that if maybe you're too decisive, that constant rush, like that hurry, then you would surround yourself with someone who would maybe gather some more data points and balance that out. And so I
hmm,
think just really understanding how you can build processes and systems around you to get to a less like something that feels less risky is really
hmm,
important. And what I think is also interesting is that people feel decision making in different areas. So either they make decisions with their head, their heart, or their gut. And so I think really being attuned to that is really important as well. And so if you identify with any of these, or this is just a new way that you've never thought about describing yourself, that's really the point of the exercise, is so that you can start to begin to define yourself in a new way, and with new language or descriptors too. And so I think some of us are more entrepreneurial leaders than we maybe ever thought before. And so when we get to the coaching piece, so as I mentioned, like how can we really then coach ourselves to become more entrepreneurial? It's really that mindset shift and it's the tools that go. And so back to, I think, there's tallies of how many times I say get comfortable being uncomfortable throughout a semester when I teach, but it's that resilience and confidence piece. And absolutely that resiliency piece and that adaptability piece comes with that global mindset and how you understand yourself in different situations and how you really then conquer when when you're out of your norm, out of your comfort zone, right?
Mhm.
Not to be dramatic, but sometimes, it feels like the comfort zone is where your dreams go to die, right? That's not where innovation happens. And so the more that we can build these environments that allow us to feel things and be more empathetic because, we're out of our element, I think that that's really important too. So for
Mhm.
the coaching piece, that identity as a launchpad piece, it's really about who are you as a founder? And those are the hard questions and the heart questions. But it's a journey and it's one that should be evergreen and ongoing. And at the end of it, it's really about knowing yourself. So that know thyself piece. And so first and foremost, you do the self-assessment. You take the quizzes, you ask others, and then the self-reflection. So then really pondering all of the data points that you got and finding the consistencies and the themes to then really get to the point, which is that self-acceptance piece. And that's where you know that the strengths and identities and motivation that you have, how you lead, how you show up is the superpower. And then that is where you build from, right? That's where you go next. And so when I think about becoming an entrepreneurial leader, I think about it in terms of these really hard, tough questions that we should always be asking ourselves. So, who are you as a leader? What do you stand for, right? Like what is the value, the non-negotiables that you have? What impact will you make? And defining your why. And so we'll talk a little bit more about defining the why. But if you know Simon Sinek, great TED talk on start with why. But the why is the North Star. So the why is where you're always headed and keeps you focused and also keeps you you know, uh, eye on the prize when the days get long or the situations get tough. And so that why has to be at the core. You have to like feel the why, especially on the hard long days. And so if you can get to answers to all of these questions, then that equals being purpose driven with impact embedded. And so I think about the College of Business here at CSU, and I think about their motto of business for a better world, right? And incorporates so much of this. And so always thinking about how we can lead towards a better world. So, going back to that values piece and how we actually do this, I believe, and my belief, my strong belief, is that startups succeed when they're built on top of identity, purpose, and mission. And so, when we think a little bit more practically about what that means, again, it's that why and that North Star. It's really being first and foremost founder centric. Who are you as the founder? And it doesn't, again, have to be about starting a business. I think entrepreneurship is so much, again, about being opportunity seeking, but I also love the idea of being intrapreneurial. So, intra being within, so disrupting within existing organizations. So, perhaps you're already in a job, right? Where is the opportunity that you specifically, with your unique strengths and identities, can be innovative? And so, it doesn't have to be starting something yourself, but actually just seeing the opportunity from where you are. So we talked a little bit about the power of coaching and the framework and the mindset. And so when I think too about coaching, I think about it in terms obviously of capacity building. And so just a quick kind of like differentiation between coaching is transformation. It's really about empowering others, and you do it again and again and again and again. It's evergreen. It should be evolution as you meet new people, as you listen to new podcasts, as you read new articles. You should be learning and growing as you go. Whereas teaching is oftentimes like I give you advice, input, like knowledge, and you receive it, right? Coaching is really more about unlocking the capacity that you have. So when we also think about coaching in that global context, that's where can equal that deeper belonging, that more authentic leadership, and really having innovation with who you are, right? So identity is innovation. And so, like, try it. Like, if you were to think about coaching and questions you could ask yourself, think about it in terms of this challenge. Like, what problem matters most to you? And I oftentimes I'm like, oh well, it's really hard to answer this question. But maybe a better way to answer it is like if you know the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, like what UN SDG am I trying to solve for? And if you can just put a number or numbers around it, that really, really takes it into more of a digestible like way to think about the problem that matters most to you. So for me, for example, I'm always trying to solve for sustainable development goal number 5, so economic empowerment and gender equality. And so I think entrepreneurship is a way to do that. So for me, it's really using then the SDG goals as a framework for that. So what strengths do you bring, right? What are uniquely unique to you, right? What is actually your unique value proposition? And who do you need to listen to first? So of those board of directors, those personal, like, do you have a co-founder? Do you have someone you go to? I happen to be a pretty high extreme executor, and so I always surround myself with relationship builders, someone who's going to be way more naturally empathetic than I am, because empathy is really, really important, especially as we know in terms of soft diplomacy. So really being intentional about who you surround yourself with. And then lastly, what small experiment could you run? So if we think about how do we coach ourselves to then coach others, I think these are really great beginning questions that we can start with. So if you know your Clifton Strengths is a global assessment, really using strengths-based leadership model. I like to think it in terms of that change-making piece. And so if by chance you know your top 5 or you've done the full 34 report, when I think about entrepreneurial leaders specifically, and especially in that change-making empowering others. I think about strengths like achiever, which is going to be absolutely needed to be persistent through the problem. I think about ideation, that creativity piece that comes in with being solution and opportunity focused. Futuristic, which is that vision piece that we've talked so much about in terms of being inherent for entrepreneurial leaders. Connectedness is that diplomacy piece, and developers really that empowering others and that give back piece. And so if you've got your top 5 somewhere, go back to them and revisit and see if you have any of these in your top 5 or where they might lie for you, and maybe think about intentionally investing or cultivating your strengths towards more of a change making lens as well. So Clifton Strengths is absolutely like my go-to coaching tool in terms of those motivations for what's going to get you to your why. There's another tool, and if you're interested in this, please reach out to me. I have facilitation in this, but entrepreneurial mindset profile. So really then how can you measure your entrepreneurial mindset? So how can you take your mindset and compare that against entrepreneurs and also more corporate leaders? And so this one's really, I love it in terms of just seeing where your mindset lies. There's not a lot of assessments that will be able to quantify this. And so EMP is really, really unique. So if this seems fascinating, please reach out to me. I would love, love, love to share and tell you more. Whoops, I think I just got out of my screen. Let's go back. Okay. Mason, are we good? I feel like I clicked the wrong button somewhere.
You're fine. We can
Okay,
still see the personality skills screen.
okay, perfect. Well, that's because I'm going to the website. Well, let me get past this one. Okay. Ikigai. If you know Ikigai, I would love for you to raise your hand and or just say yes in the chat, because in terms of like one of my favorite frameworks, it's Ikigai, and especially that intersection of what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, what you can receive value from, and what you're good at. And so Ikigai, the Japanese concept of your reason for being, or in French, your raison d'être, right? It's really this beautiful visualization of your passion, your mission, your vocation, and your profession. And so I love to use it for students in terms of really being able to understand of this intersection and what quadrants you're able to fulfill, and especially maybe at a younger age. This is where the evergreen evolution comes from, is only recently in the last 2 or 3 years have I been able to find my ikigai, and hit all four quadrants. Oftentimes that what you can be paid for is the hard one, right? Because maybe your vocation and your passion don't necessarily line up. But I actually think that what you can be paid for is where entrepreneurship can come in, right? That's really then also at that intersection of what the world needs, right? So what is the opportunity that only you are trying to solve for your unique value proposition? So in terms of like economic empowerment, I really love to ask founders to think about their ikigai in terms of the businesses that maybe they're trying to create. So love this framework. Lastly, I wanted to just talk a little bit about ecosystems for impact. So how can we work together? What does that look like? And so when we think about it, I hope that it's resonated pretty clearly that it starts with you, right? It starts with doing the hard work and asking yourself a lot of questions, right? It's a journey. But in terms of like how you can start and what questions besides those big overarching kind of intimidating questions we asked on a previous slide, it's just like to get to your purpose, like what issue or challenge motivates you the most. And, I've got a lot of different prompts, but if this one doesn't hit necessarily right, like how can you frame it in terms of a sustainable development goal? That strengths finder, right? Like what are your strengths? What are your lived experiences that you bring to the work, right? And so when we think about your experiences in the lived, like what do you have specifically? And identity comes in here so much, right? So do you lead with your gender? Do you lead with your citizenship? Do you lead with your language? Do you lead with your socioeconomic status, right? Like it's a wheel and it shows up in different places in different cultural contexts too. But it's so important to understand, right? How you show up and what strengths and experiences have led you to the point that you're at right there. Step three is going to be really intentional focus on that diplomacy piece. So, who do you need to bring with you to solve the wicked problems of the world or the problem that you're trying to solve? And really, also, who do you need to listen to? So, really invest in that deep dive and listening to others and that mutually beneficial cross-cultural exchange that can happen when you really try to understand a problem from a different cultural context, right? And then the last one is experiment. Like, so what small action could you take in the next month? Like, break it down into bite-sized pieces to be able to feel like you're leading towards impact, you're leading towards your purpose, you're leading towards the problem that you really want to solve for right now. And again, it's yes, it's problem solving, but it's really important to keep adding that entrepreneurial mindset, which is opportunity seeking, right? So to make consciously that switch to go from problem to opportunity, that's really then I think where that shift in mindset will happen for you. Okay, so I want to end a little bit with how we started, but we've talked a lot about shifting and mindset, and doesn't necessarily always have to start with solution. It can start with people and what you believe and how you lead that change. And so my last like question here for you, and where I'd really love for the conversation to go, is what conversation could you start that might unlock someone else's potential? Because as much as we're investing in ourselves and understanding this, it is that give back impact piece that really embeds and bridges entrepreneurial leadership. And so I'm looking at our time right now to see where we can go from here, or if there's any other concepts that y'all want to dig into a little bit deeper. I'm happy to go there too. But I'd love to know, what are next steps and takeaways that you have for yourself in being a more global entrepreneurial leader.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Well, while we give folks maybe a couple minutes to respond to this question, we did have some questions come in
Oh,
throughout your
great.
presentation, so maybe I can ask you some of those. So we had a question that was, at what point does the how come in? And I think you
Yeah.
you just sort of mentioned that with, step four of like, what can you feasibly do in the next month? What's a small action? But
Yeah.
beyond that, is there anything else you'd like to say for that? When does the how come in?
Yeah, right. So like the who, what, where, when, why, how, right? And I always say start with why, but the how is actually the execution piece. It's going to be how do you get it done? And it's through the tools. I mean, I absolutely think it's like actually trying to identify how you're going to get to the why. So you've got to I guess in a way, to get to why, you a little bit have to start with the how. And so I've given you just three tools, those coaching tools on how you can accomplish that. But right at some point, it's got to be practical, so that you can implement it and get to the why. So
Hmm.
Strengths Finder, entrepreneurial mindset profile, ikigai, but I also love other assessments. I love five love languages, honestly. I
Mm.
love Enneagram. I also love like your self-saboteur. So who is your self-saboteur? Who's the one who's sitting on your shoulder, kind of like angels and devils, and how do you name that? And sometimes it's oftentimes imposter syndrome. So those are some of the
Yeah.
key hows that I've been able to use.
Okay. Great. Another question from the audience. We're curious how you balance the drive with being an entrepreneurial leader with soft diplomacy skills. So I think sometimes the entrepreneurial leadership aspect of reacting quickly and taking
Mhm.
decisive action can sometimes feel at odds with the soft diplomacy aspect of it. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, like great question. And I think that that constant like hurriedness is something that I really relate to. I'm very decisive. It's actually like one of my values is being decisive, but I'm decisive because I'm pretty resilient. So in my mind, I can make quick decisions because I have resiliency and adaptability pretty high to trust that I know and have the confidence to make the best next step. Now, is that going to be way faster than other people in making decisions? Absolutely, because their decision making is going to look and feel, literally probably feel much different. And so I'm going to go faster than most. And so I actually intentionally partner with someone who is very strategic and has input and is analytical, who needs more data points to make decisions. And so it's a balance, right? I'll go slower, they'll go faster, they'll provide more data versus my resiliency, and we'll make a more balanced decision that way. And I only learned that in terms of finding a pretty amazing partner to trust that balance with. So for me, it's having someone else in the decision making chair if it's a big decision that feels like I need to get input.
Thank you for that. We had another question from the audience. So in lean launch
Mhm.
excuse me,
Mhm.
entrepreneurship language places a lot of value in having an MVP, minimum viable product, in order to test, pivot, collaborate with other ideas. If global entrepreneurship shifts towards people over merely ideas, does the idea of an MVP connect to building resilience, confidence, mindset, and change makers at all? Or what does this look like for you in your experience?
Yeah, that's great. Right, it's back to that experimentation piece. It's like what small step can you take to experiment, right? And test ideas. And I think in terms of like the entrepreneurial leadership piece and the change maker piece, it's throwing lots of ideas at the wall and seeing what works, but bringing others along to add input, especially if you're going into areas that you're not the local. You're trying to solve for a problem that isn't, necessarily yours to solve for. I think then that's really where the the lean to launch and rely on others to lead how experimentation would look and feel would be really important. Trusting them to come up with the MVP and providing feedback. I think when asked, I think about it in terms of like, you know, uh, cross-cultural learning and that oftentimes you learn more than you teach. And I think that that's why coaching is really important too, is coaching others towards empowerment and asking those questions along the way, especially because I think experimentation is so important. But um but yeah, I think it's trusting the partner, right? I think it's that shared purpose that we started the conversation with too, that there's alignment, that we're trying to get to a solution for better, right? And I think that that's where it has to start. That trust building piece is going to be critical. Step one to get then to the lean to launch model or that MVP that feels like it's been co-created.
Interesting. Thank you. Appreciate that. Were there any other slides that you wanted to go over, Leslie? We've got a little bit of a lull in the questions if there was some
Yeah,
material that you wanted to cover.
No, that's great. I did want to leave, if anyone wants to connect on LinkedIn, I've got my QR code here and would love for y'all to connect to reach out, especially if there's anything that resonated. I'd love to follow you too. I always say like my LinkedIn community is yours, and so I'll leave this up for a second and also talk a little bit more about some of the global initiatives that I'm currently participating in right now, which I'm really excited about. So I'd mentioned that CSU I4E had hosted two YSEALI fellows last fall, but we were really excited to hear as a team that there's a reciprocal exchange. So I'll actually be going and visiting one of our fellows in Malaysia and really focusing in on the project that she had. And so what she's been able to do is really look at some of the curriculum that we have here at the Institute for Entrepreneurship and create a database and resources for founders to go that are more accessible, more approachable. And so to be able to then put a cultural lens and see what she was able to look at here in Fort Collins and specifically on campus, then how can other founders in Southeast Asia, but especially in Malaysia, use that tool for her as well. And then I do want to also forward the slide in terms of if you haven't connected with the Institute for Entrepreneurship yet, would love to extend the invitation, come to our programming. We actually do have a showcase, our Institute for Entrepreneurship showcase, which is going to be on April 13th. Would love to have the community there to support to see six of our founders take the stage and pitch for funding. And so really great day of innovation. And so would love for you to come out and learn a little bit more about what we're doing. We have a student organization called Ignite by I4E. So if you are a student, we'd love for you to participate in that. And then also supporting another student organization called Ram Ventures. They actually have some hackathons that are scheduled throughout the rest of the semester. So if that hands-on entrepreneurship piece sounds interesting, look up Ram Ventures too. All of this information is available on our website as well.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you for those links and that information. I hope everybody can take the chance and join for those opportunities. We did have two other questions. One was, what tools do you like for the get to know thyself piece of this? And I think
Yeah.
I think you responded to that by speaking about the Clifton strengths and the ikigai and the
Yes.
even the love language. So I would like to maybe pivot that question and acknowledge that as humans, we are not always great at acknowledging our weaknesses and
Right.
uh and really taking that sort of constructive criticism piece of it. And so
Right.
how can we, I guess, be better at that with an entrepreneurial mindset? Do you have any sort of reflections or tips for that piece?
Yeah, so I love Clifton Strengths, and if you invest in the full 34, you will very clearly see the blind spots that you have. Obviously, the ones that are going to be ranked low. So we don't love to call them weaknesses; we call them blind spots. But what
Right.
that does is obviously really shows you where you might need to supplement and build team around you. Co-founders, right? I think a lot of people might think that they need to hire like a chief technical officer first, but really, if you look at the blind spots, you want to hire towards those that maybe have strengths in the blind spots. My example is I'm strong executing, and so I really need someone who's going to be strong in relationship building. Empathy happens to be pretty low for me. I've really invested in trying to be more empathetic, but I do have someone who keeps me pretty honest if I do get to be more task over people. And so I think that awareness and that intentionality of building a team so that you can really like live and work in your strengths really
Mm.
then equals being in your flow state and letting others also lead from their flow state too with the strengths that they have that you might not. And knowing that we've got a few extra minutes, I do have some slides that I hid at the back, which I think will be really relevant for this conversation too, that I'm going to unhide and share with y'all
Okay.
because this is also kind of where I geek out as well. So when we think about strengths and especially those strengths that are associated with entrepreneurial leaders, There's been a lot of research on if there's common strengths associated specifically with those that identify as founders. And so, the millions and millions of people who have taken Clifton Strengths Finder, they've started to see some commonalities in the strengths. And so, if you look at the left, those are the entrepreneurial leadership traits that we have already chatted about. And then the right would be the associated Clifton strength. So, you can see that. People who have taken the assessment who identify as founders are oftentimes going to have high achiever, high connectedness, high significance, obviously high ideation and futuristic. Also, command being that presence that you bring to situations where you can feel that that command would be really powerful on stage pitching for funding or in front of actual investors and funding. That's definitely going to be a strength that an entrepreneur has, as well as analytical, so bringing the data piece to the decision making as you understand and make decisions, and adaptability that with the flow, right? I think about a conversation we had yesterday in my class about follow the feather and being adaptable, right? If a door is open or a window is closing, like take a peek, but know that the journey is not linear and it shouldn't be linear. In fact, you should be learning as you go. And so if you think about other associated strengths that are with change making, that significance continues to come up and up because that's the impact piece. That's the why, right? That's going to be the North Star. And so absolutely a founder has to have significance and know what the vision and the values that they bring are. Activator, self-assurance, developer, empathy, these are all other associated strengths. The self-assurance one is really interesting because self-assurance is that I am confident in myself, I am confident in my ability. And what that means is that I am confident taking risks. So self-assurance is oftentimes the strength that gets associated with being more comfortable with risk or having a higher appetite for risk. And so self-assurance is usually pretty low for a lot of people, but it's extremely high for those who identify themselves as entrepreneurs. So I would say self-assurance for sure is one of those strengths. If you don't naturally have it, you would invest in to then be more of an entrepreneurial leader.
Yeah, I think that's so important too because the journey, the entrepreneurship journey can be long and it can be difficult at times. I think there's a lot of ups and downs that go with starting your own venture, and so to be self-assured and that you know your path and are going to stick with it, I think yeah, that is definitely very important. We did have a reflection regarding these slides. Um, One of our attendees was surprised to see that strategic wasn't listed
Hmm.
uh, on here.
Yeah, strategic is probably um, associated somewhere else, but maybe it is encompassed within ideation and
Sure.
futuristic too.
Yeah.
And so I think that in terms of maybe I'd have to count these, but these were the top 10 associated strengths that the research was showing, but maybe strategic is pretty close at 11 or 12. But absolutely that strategy, right? That's the roadmap to get to where you're going. And that futuristic and ideation is going to also be very complementary to strategic as well.
Mm. We did have a couple more questions come in. One, sort of bringing it home to CSU. How can we bring an entrepreneurial leadership mindset to CSU?
Mm. So, right, this gets back to that entrepreneurship, right? How do we disrupt from within an existing organization? That organization obviously being CSU, but also I think about the industry, right, of higher education. And
Mm-hmm.
so, where I think, higher education is ripe for disruption and we should really be opportunity seeking. I think it's honestly right now. Like at the student level, trying to infuse it as early on in curriculum, right? So could it be a core class that freshmen take? Oftentimes that mindset piece is going to lead to then maybe opportunity seeking and that purpose finding of what I want to study and what I want to major in. So I think it could also be really powerful in terms of early year on campus or even in career services to use that to understand where identity and strengths and flow and motivation go hand in hand just in choosing your major. But in terms of faculty and staff, I think we all need to be opportunity seeking right now. in terms of what is the value that higher ed brings, and specifically what is the value that CSU brings, and understanding our own unique value proposition here at CSU, and what do we stand for, and how we would stand out amongst, our competitive landscape of other colleges that students are choosing. And so when we think about that entrepreneurial mindset and that entrepreneurial leadership, right, we need to be really intentional about the decision makers that we're looking to and that we're hiring for right now are really going to be more opportunity seeking than problem solving as we lead out on kind of what is the future of CSU, what is the future of higher education. And I think that that's a big question right now. I think it's a huge question right now, and so it's very timely and maybe a little bit overdue in terms of trying to prove the value. COVID absolutely showed this to us in terms of the disruption within all industries, but especially the industry of learning, which is the industry that I am in with, choosing to work within a college and a university. So I think it could be a trickle down, absolutely, but a powerful tool, an empowerment tool, if you will, which is where I choose to believe.
Yeah, thank you for those reflections. In my position within the Office of International Programs, I work very closely with a lot of faculty and staff across campus and their pursuit of international partnerships. And it's incredible to see how creative folks are in expanding their delivery of courses to international students and
Yeah.
really doing it in a collaborative way with our partner institutions to best serve that population for what their needs are, what areas they see for growth and expansion. Um, we really don't want to be engaging in any forms of extractive partnership. And so I love to see when faculty and staff are really out there seeking input from our partners as to how we can best meet in the middle, what they have that we don't, what we have that they don't, and what we can do with both of those things.
Well, I
Um,
think about it in terms of customer discovery too, right? Like the customer is the student too. And so when I'm in the classroom teaching or we're creating programs at I4E, it's being obsessed with the customer and understanding what are the pain points that they're experiencing here on campus and trying to solve for that. But also to plug, one of our core programs that we have, it's our front door program. It's Venture Validator. So I hope everyone who has an idea or an inkling of an idea will think about taking this program. We offer it each semester, but it's really to validate the idea that you have, and especially to do that through customer discovery and that interviewing process and being empathetic and making sure that the problem isn't just yours that you are having, but that actually others are having it too. And then what's the lens that you can bring to that would be different. And so,
yeah.
a lot of different programming options at I4E to take that through, but I do love it in terms of partnership building as well, that capacity building, that ecosystem
Mhm.
building.
Yeah. It was interesting to thank you for that plug. I hope
Yeah.
that people can participate. It sounds very interesting. You had also mentioned the major disruption that COVID caused, and so one of our participants actually submitted a reflection, sort of that they also agree that it would be interesting to have a sort of, as you suggested, maybe a first year course for students about sort of critical thinking and mindset. Um, After all these major disruptions and how we can use entrepreneurship to and leadership to advance our initiatives.
Right.
Yeah. Is there any last minute thoughts that you would like to share? We are getting close on time. Again, thank you so much for doing this, Leslie. We really appreciate your time, and it's been such an interesting discussion today. So thank you.
No, Mesa, thank you for facilitating.
Mhm.
I think that, entrepreneur leadership, in terms of if we think of other leadership frameworks and we think about, where we might fit in as a leader, I really think it's an approachable framework. And my hope always when I finish these sessions is that you'll start to describe and define yourself as an entrepreneur leader, understand the investment of cultivating a mindset that is more opportunity seeking. And I think in terms of like that impact piece and like always thinking about the impact, either that you can bring to the world, or the impact that you have when you're making decisions about, especially businesses that you're buying from and what do they stand for, right?
Mm,
And kind of that economic empowerment piece is really yours as a customer and a consumer, as well as, on the other side of the leadership piece too. And I think so much of, spending power comes down to values, and I don't know if people really understand that. And so that's been an
mm,
interesting class conversation that we've had recently, is about being a little bit more intentional about, your buying power that you have.
yeah, very good.
So business for a better world, but also I think starting businesses for a better world.
Yes, I love that. I don't know about the audience, but I am feeling inspired. So thank you. I will definitely be reflecting on my why and what I can potentially do in this space as well. So.
Great.
Thank you again, Leslie. For our audience, again, I would just like to remind you that you will be receiving a survey immediately after this session ends. If you can take a minute to fill that out, we greatly appreciate your feedback. Leslie, we are giving you a big round of applause, even though you cannot hear or see the audience, but thank you again. Have a great day. And I would also like to just remind you that we have another session coming up at 10:30 this morning, and it is titled In with the Old, Atoms for Peace and Soft Power Diplomacy. So please join us at 10:30 for our next session. Thank you and have a great day.